And we're live. It is Friday, March 14th, the year of our Lord, 2025. It is 8 a.m. I am not in an airport, as you can see. I'm in my comfy chair in my upstairs studio, and I don't have a guest. And why do I not have a guest? I planned a guest. I invited a guest. The guest accepted. And this morning I sent the guest the link. And turns out the guest had made other plans. Now, what are these other plans? Well, I don't know. Actually, I do know, but I'm not going to tell you because some of you know who this guest is, and I do not want to invade anybody's privacy. But I do want to say that not showing up on Dog Shirt TV with 7 minutes notice is rude. And I want to denounce all guests who do not show up with 7 minutes notice. And I want to say to you, Lisa Kaplan, that's hurt my feelings. And so I am saying to all 17 people who are watching this live, and all people who ever see it for posterity, when you make an appointment with Dog Shirt TV, you are expected to keep it, because otherwise I am sitting here by myself and there are no co-hosts, as you can see, and I may end up once again in an hour-long conversation with John Hawkinson, though a pleasure that will be. I gotta say, it's not what I had planned for today. And although my esteemed co-host, Holly Berkeley Fletcher, insists that this show lacks a structure, she is wrong. It is meticulously planned. Let me describe my meticulous planning for the day. I had invited a guest. I was going to monologue for approximately 6 minutes, maybe 7, maybe 5.5, while the guest looked on in some perplexity. I was going to conclude by talking about the revolutionary features of the show, of which there are many. And we were then going to have some banter with the guest, lasting approximately 5 or 6 minutes. And then we were going to go into a substantive conversation of disinformation and the guest's work for the remainder of the show, maybe occasionally veering off into other areas, but, always returning to that main theme. And occasionally I would have to hit mute because there would be noise going on in the room. Like, for example, right now, my dog is licking my feet. And if I were not speaking, I would mute that away because, some people find that noise unpleasant. The show has structure. And when the guest doesn't show up, it interferes with the structure because now we are 4 minutes into the show and I am thinking to myself, how am I going to keep talking past the monologue? What am I going to talk about? Who am I going to talk with? Is Holly Berkeley Fletcher likely to show up unannounced and save the day? Might this be one of the days that Jonathan Rauch just randomly shows up on screen and has something he wants to talk about? In which case, that would be fabulous. Is this another day where I'm going to have to beg people to come on who are not John Hawkinson before I let John Hawkinson come on and save the day? And doing that 3 times in a week would seem like a really deficient approach and would almost imply that I had done no planning for the show, which in this case was completely untrue. Well, all of this I lay at the feet of the estimable Lisa Kaplan, who had plenty of good reasons, I'm sure, for canceling on me 7 minutes before the show. Uh, but none of them, not one of those very good reasons, alleviates my pain right now, though I accept them as legitimate. And I also accept that when you are not paying your guests, they really have no obligation to show up. Just as when you are not paying your co hosts, they have no obligation to show up. Just as when you are not paying any producers, it's amazing that producers just don't show up to produce this show. So, look, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. The sun is shining. Actually, it's not. The birds are chirping. It's going to be a great freaking day. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV. It is a fucking revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features, and there are many, is that sometimes our guests don't show up. And we have to do the show anyway. And another one of the revolutionary features is when that happens, we often have no fallback plan except, you know, maybe Holly will show up. Maybe John Hawkinson, who has hacked the system, by the way, and knows how to show up without clicking that button that, you know, that the rest of you have to click in order to show up on screen and get my permission and stuff. John doesn't have to do that because he has hacked the system. So maybe that will happen. Maybe John Roush will show up. Maybe Eve Guman will show up because she's not stuck on a train. Maybe any of those things will happen, or maybe one of you will click that button and have an agenda item to talk about, like Joel the Nudge just did from the wilds of Minnesota. Joel, thank
Good
you for
morning.
putting John Hawkinson this morning. What
Yeah,
is on your mind?
I'm a not a John, but I'll, be a placeholder until one shows up, if that's cool.
Yeah, Joel has a lot in common with John. Same number of letters in the
Right.
first name. The first two are the same. It's you've got, plus your sweater is better than John's.
Well, this is the cabin sweater, so I'm at the cabin in the woods, as you can tell. I've gotten a few pieces of very excellent advice, and this is for real. Uh, and a lot of it came from my mother. So my Nordic athletes that I work with are used to me saying, "Well, you know what my mother always said." So
But
in
wait
this
a minute.
case,
Did your mother give you advice for what to do when your guest on your live stream show doesn't show up and informs you 7 minutes earlier? Because my mother didn't give me advice about that.
close. Her
Okay.
advice on this topic, and for real, is one of the finest pieces of advice I ever got. And her advice is the world belongs to those who show up.
Well,
Literally,
the
you have
world,
to be in the room when the decisions get made
right. Well, the
if you
world
want to
doesn't
have it.
belong to Lisa Kaplan, apparently, then.
See? See, this is the
Say,
penalty. This is the inherent penalty if you didn't show up,
right. She didn't show up. And look, there's a version of that. I think it's a Woody Allen joke, isn't it? 90% of life is showing up, or
Is that
um,
right?
I can't. It's funnier in the way he formulated it, but I can't remember what it is because we're all supposed to forget
Right.
everything about Woody Allen now, which is hard actually because there are a lot of good Woody Allen lines. But
Yeah.
yeah, no. Look, there's no doubt that Lisa Kaplan didn't show up, as evidenced
Hmm.
by the fact that she's not here, and we're we reserve the right to mock her. And the other thing is, I'm going to a conference next week with Lisa Kaplan, and I'm going to tease her mercilessly about it. So, I think that's a, you know, your mom is a very wise woman, and it's a shame she didn't raise Lisa Kaplan.
So if you want to, you can say, well, you know what Janet always said. You could
Oh, my
lead with
mother's
that.
named Janet too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yay, Janets.
So our moms have something in common.
That's right. So now my dad gave me a piece of advice too, maybe a little less pivotal in my life, and it was never fart in an elevator.
Hmm.
Because you never
That's
know.
interesting. It's
It,
a little less applicable to this
right.
situation.
It doesn't really go here,
Um,
but also handy.
can I just point out that one of the things about the remote world that is, uh, you know, a there are many disadvantages to it, but one of the things about the remote world that is advantageous over the in-person world is that farting is just not a problem.
Right.
And,
Thank you, Zoom.
you know, like, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, and on the internet, nobody smells when you fart, and
That's
nobody
right.
even wonders who cut that one. And I think there's something there's something useful about that. I don't know if it's worth the social isolation and the other problems associated with it, but there's something to the hey, you can just fart at will.
Good heavens, I am a terrible guest, man. I got us to farts in 2 moves.
You know, look, at the end of
Sorry,
the
man.
day, we are all 13-year-old boys, and fart jokes will go a long way.
They always
Um,
kill.
they always kill. And also, there's one problem though with the fart joke. There aren't many problems with fart jokes, but is one problem with a fart joke, which is it's hard to follow it up with anything. Like, all right, we've done the
Yeah.
fart joke. What do we talk about now?
Yeah, that's like,
And
thank you, Cleveland. Good night.
right, exactly. You should sort of end, hold the fart joke to the end
That's
because,
right. That's a
what
closer.
once you've done that, then there's all there is to do is what we're doing now, which is to talk about talking about the fart joke, and it gets pretty meta pretty fast.
Yep.
So what
Yep.
else? What's on your mind this morning,
Well, this
other
morning I
than
was,
denouncing Lisa Kaplan and for
yes,
not showing up? And
good
I'm
heavens.
gonna, by the way,
Janet
I'm gonna
is
send her
rolling in
the
her
video
grave.
of this because, like, the whole, there is a penalty for not showing up on Dog Shirt TV, and it is the fact that so if you do this to MSNBC, they just pretend you don't exist. Right, and they go to the other. But if you don't show
Funny.
up on Dog Shirt TV, we're gonna talk about you for an hour.
This is part of the penalty.
Yeah, it
So this
is.
morning I was noticing on the blue skies that there seems to be a fair bit of displeasure with Mr. Schumer this morning.
Well,
So I
yes,
was
and
kind of
I
curious,
may
is
have
there
even
any
contributed to
insider
that.
sort of info on what the four level chess play is here? Because I'm not seeing it.
Okay, so first of all, as you may have seen, I denounced Chuck Schumer's decision last night in Dog Shirt TV. So I actually, on Dog Shirt Daily, so I actually don't want to say anything in defense of it. But I will, for game purposes,
Right.
try to figure, like, try to game out what he may be thinking. And so I have a couple of possibilities. Um, the first is um, one that I don't think is what's going on, but it may be, which is that he doesn't have the votes to stop it. And he would rather um, look like he organized this than look like it happened, that he doesn't have control over his caucus. Um, so that's one possibility. I don't think that's what's going on because um, he's actually got two, like, there's only, as far as I know, there's only two Democrats, and he's one of them who say they are voting with the majority. The other one being John Fetterman. And so it's not clear to me that he's got right. It's not even clear to me that he's got the votes to make this happen. So But that is one possibility. Second possibility is he's terrified of Democrats being blamed for a shutdown. And there is some reason for to be concerned about this if you're a Democratic leader. Generally speaking, the party that could last prevent the shutdown gets blamed for it. Usually that's the Republican Party, and because shutdowns normally happen when Democrats are in the executive and Republicans are in control of Congress. But it could be simply the crude calculation that who's going to get blamed. Um, we are, because we voted against the bill that would have kept the government open. Um, I gotta say, I don't think that's the reason either. Which brings me to the third reason, which is actually the one that he talked about in his speech, which is that he's very afraid of Elon Musk and Donald Trump being in charge of implementing the shutdown and using it to advance the Doge agenda. They decide which agencies close, who gets furloughed, whether those people come back, and that he's afraid of um, essentially contributing to the gut government by shutting down the government. Now, I want to say this: if this is what's behind it, it is a legitimate concern. Um, this is a genuinely no-win situation for Democrats, and I don't want to piss on the concern because it's a legit one. The um, I think, however, that here is why it's wrong. Well, it's or rather not why it's wrong because it's not wrong, but why it shouldn't be the governing concern. Um, if you want a seat at the table, you have to take it. And the how do you grab a seat at the table from the mean girls who are, excluding you? And the answer is you take away something from them that they want and you make them do business with you by denying them something, right? This is something we all learned in middle school. And look, if Donald Trump says, I'm going to, or House Republicans say we're going to take $1 billion from the DC government. By the way, I live in DC. That's our police department, our schools, that's a big deal. Um, $1 billion from the DC budget. If they say we're going to do a down payment on the Doge cuts, yeah, if they say we're going to, you know, we're not merely not going to figure out a way using the appropriations process to require that appropriations be honored, which is a deep matter of separation of powers that's going on right now between the executive and the legislative branch. And you say, okay, I'll vote for that. And you, as the minority leader, actually deliver the votes for that to pass without having had a seat at the table, without having had any input on the bill, without having gotten a single concession. um, you've just like made yourself into a doormat with the um, welcome, I'm irrelevant, walk on me sign on it. And I just think, you know, honestly, you can't ask the policy questions of refusing to engage in that. Yes, there are significant downsides to refusing to engage with that. You have to create a place for yourself at the table. I don't even think it's voluntary. Um, it's not it shouldn't be even a choice. You just have to do it. Otherwise, what is the line that you're going to draw? So that's, I think, the three possibilities of what he's thinking, at least two of which are legitimate concerns. Um, I don't think any of them justifies the action, which is mind blowing to me. And I can only hope that no or insufficient numbers of Democrats will follow him, because once they do, there is, I really don't see. I don't see what the point of an opposition party is if you don't contest this in a meaningful way.
And that's kind of the thing I got to thinking about is I think that it would be nice to show that they're prepared to tolerate some pain.
Yes, now, of course, the pain is not going to be theirs, right? The pain is going to
Well,
be
politically,
on the part
political.
of,
I mean, they're
right,
willing to ride out some rough days politically, and they've got some tolerance and a willingness to ride them out. I think showing that is not a horrible idea. And
right.
but and
I
then I'm going
think
to
the
pass
basic,
the baton to Laura here. Thank you so much. Good to see everybody
excellent.
this morning.
So I think, just to be clear, the problem here is that they're thinking about this as a shutdown. And if you think about it as a shutdown, well, the Democrats generally don't like shutdowns. They like the government. They want the government to work. Shutting down the government is a bit of theatrics with high cost for government workers. It's a high cost for government effectiveness, and um, Democrats don't like to play that game. Um, but the problem is, this is not the shutdown. Here is the side effect, not the intended effect. The intended effect is to avoid passing a budget bill at which you in which you had no input, and reflects some degree of validation of grotesque action that is happening right now. And the question is, do you want your name to be on that, or do you want to throw yourself in front of that train? Laura, good morning.
Sounds like the trolley problem again.
Yeah, it all boils down to trolley problems.
Well, I didn't get my Makeup Addict package yet, so this is it.
Look, I didn't either, but have identified two Mexican avocados that have my name on them, and on Sunday afternoon, evening, Holly and I will be making Mexican avocado face mask videos. So, um, you know,
I hope
couldn't be more excited.
I hope she remembers the maple syrup eyebrow potion.
Yeah. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is Lisa Kaplan and how many more chances she gets.
Lisa is a good friend. She gets more chances.
Okay, all right.
I'm just irritated.
Well, last time she was supposed to come on, I went and researched her and came up with a big list of questions, which I can't find this morning. But the gist of it was, back in the day, she talked about how civic education would get us out of this mess, and if only we knew how to use the internet responsibly. I mean, that wasn't the central thrust of what she said, but that was part of it. And I was thinking, wow, that's so, you know, 2016 or whatever it was. Um, I'm curious about what she's thinking. So you're going to answer for her, right? I mean, you're going to make the.
I
She would have.
Look, I fully get to make up Lisa Kaplan's views and opinions about things since she didn't show up.
So it seems that there's some propaganda on the internet, and at times as if we're losing the war for the minds of information consumers, and that everybody's in a cult and brainwashed, and the cat's out of the barn. And what I wanted to know is, if she studies this, or if you channeling her want to just invent something, what now, and where are the greatest sources of hope, not for fighting disinformation, because I don't think you can fight disinformation. I tried deprogramming someone who was in QAnon. We met with this person for 9 months every week, and then she would go and mainline, propaganda. So what's the hope? I'm gonna wind down my question. So what are the areas where change can happen?
Well, so I think Lisa's focus is on counter disinformation, right? When somebody is running a disinformation campaign against you, what can you do? That's sort of the work that she and her company do. I think the your question is in some ways better directed to Alicia, who works on matters more broadly related to the information environment and the ecosystem. And what she would say if she were here is that question is is too we shouldn't jump to the what can we do about it question, because we actually don't understand the ecosystem. We don't understand, the first thing to do when you studied environmentalism was not figure out how to fix the environment, right? It was to actually understand something about ecosystems. It was actually to understand um, ecology, right? And it took 100 years of studying how ecosystems work, what ecosystems were, before we were in a position to really do useful stuff in the environmental space. And we still make mistakes. Um, and so Alicia's argument would be start by defining a field of information ecology and really learning something about the way, you know, when people jump to do something about disinformation, there's not a defined set of terms, right? We don't all mean the same thing when we say X, right? So start with like basic research about what the space looks like, what how information ecosystems work, what we do and don't know about them. And she would say like the rush to do something, capital D, capital S, is part of the problem that we're all, lurching from ill-considered thing to ill-considered thing, instead of actually taking the time to know what we're talking about. And the longer I watch this space, the more convinced I am that this fundamental point is right.
Hmm.
Um, I resist the don't try to do anything point, because I think there are some issues that actually we do need to address, but we need to address them with a real humility about our larger ignorance of the atmosphere in which we're working. And I think that there's something to be said for really prioritizing the basic research and doing things in the zone of letting a thousand flowers bloom, and
Mhm.
without a deep-seated conviction that it's whatever we're going to do is going to work, whatever that may mean. So that's my now I think the question that Lisa deals with, which is, if you're a company that is the subject of a QAnon influence operation, what do you do about it? That is a different matter because there you have some, you're not actually trying to deal with the whole information environment or, disinformation in general. You're dealing with people lying about me, right?
Right.
And those lies spreading. So I think you can be a little bit more confident that certain things will work.
I tried to get in touch with her company because I have some friends who are in that position where people are probably trying to trash them electronically, and didn't hear back. But you can understand that what you just shared sounds dissatisfying even to a person who gets the philosophy of it. Like there's not any sort of blunt instrument that can be used to fix it. I'm curious to know what John Hawkinson would say to make this sound less technical.
I don't really have much to say on this point. I had some other items, so I'll pass for the moment.
All right.
Yeah, it's not anytime you say um, we don't know how to deal with this problem. Um, don't don't fall for snake oils that promise to address it. Um, it's it is definitely dissatisfying. You always want to have a magic solution or at least something that is going to be responsive to the problem. But let me just give you a few
Yeah,
examples.
that was the question I forgot to ask was, do you have any examples?
Yeah, so remember when we all thought that fact checking was going to be
Right.
a very valuable approach,
I
and
do, and that was
you
in
know,
her and she mentioned fact checking, and I was saying fact checking doesn't work. We know that doesn't work.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like we have all these organizations devoted to fact checking, and boy, does that not seem to make much of a difference, right? Um, do you remember, you know, the deplatforming of very large numbers of bad guys, which was really a thing. And then they went and started their own media organizations and or platforms, and then they got Elon Musk to buy the biggest one, or the not the biggest one, but the one that was most influential in propagating information,
Mhm.
and invite them all back, right? How much did the information environment improve because of these various interventions that we that proved completely unsustainable, by the way? And then one of the other things that happened when people got then Twitter and Facebook, and is that to take action, to do something, is that Congress became, formed a weaponization committee that went after them for it and became itself the chief uh, vehicle for lying about the platform's information policies. And so I'm not saying it's hopeless, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm sure there is something you can do about it. That there are policies that improve and make worse information ecosystem quality. But I do think Alicia's point that we are trying to find magic bullets to deal with entire weather systems, right? And it's like you're firing a slingshot into a hurricane. Okay, I understand that there are some policy interventions that may be valuable for dealing with hurricanes, but don't think you're going to stand there with your slingshot and hit the targets.
I do have one thought, which I briefly mentioned in the chat, and I'm definitely not expert in this, but it may be helpful to look to the history of dealing with people with odd beliefs. And one example are the people who believe that the Earth is flat. And,
It
that's been
is,
around
John.
for a very long time. Uh, I mean, after we learned that it wasn't. And,
It is.
well, yes. Uh,
I
and
mean, look out your window. Do you see the curve of the Earth?
well, yeah, it's called the horizon. But uh,
No, no, John, that's what they want you to believe.
so apparently, and I don't know much about this, I just saw a random reference recently, but there was a trip to Antarctica where a bunch of flat earthers were dragged along to see the phenomenon of the midnight sun, which they had claimed, couldn't possibly exist. And the result of this was actually one of them was converted and the others weren't. And I don't know what this really says, but I really just bring it up to say we can probably look at history and find more mature examples than the present day problems and look at how they have been successfully and unsuccessfully battled in the past.
So, Alicia's book has 5 case studies of uh, uh, prior information environments, and they're not studies of false beliefs per se. They're studies of information environments in history, and how what we know about them and how they contributed um, to relevant historical events. And, the broad point you take away from that is, gosh, people really, those environments were complicated and the leaders at the time really didn't understand them. And so, look, I am not saying it's hopeless. I am saying that it's complicated, and we should respect the complexity. And the fundamental complexity of the current information environment is it's the first time in human history that everybody can talk to everybody. Um, um, it's not that literally happened in the 3 of our adult lifetimes. If you think back to when we were teenagers, you could not address the whole world.
I want to point out, Ben, the corollary of this is no one can talk to anyone. And if you think back to when we were children, you could send a letter to maybe not the president of the United States, but almost anyone else. And I think you might have even odds, or at least 1 in 10, of having that letter be read and getting a response. And
That's right.
that is no longer true today.
That's exactly right. And I think the phenomenon that everybody is a newspaper
Mm.
is one that it literally developed in not just in our lifetimes, in our adult lifetimes. I may be a little older than you, John, but when I went to the Washington Post as a in 1997, you could, if we didn't publish your op-ed, you didn't get to speak to the public. Like, that was a thing, like that was a power that we had, that information. I mean, you could go to the Wall Street Journal or you could go to the New York Times, but somebody had to give you permission to speak. And yeah, I know someone's going to write in the chat there was Usenet. I rest my case, right? Um, like I think that there were forums, just like there were bars where you could go and yell about things. I understand that those things existed for a few years prior, but in our adult lifetimes, we have gone from an environment in which you needed permission to address the public to an environment in which you don't. And one of the important corollaries of that is that I can make makeup videos and people can see them, which, granted, that is a great thing on the plus side, right? Another one is that QAnon can make videos and reprogram Laura's deprogrammed friends. And maybe that's not so great. But they're two sides of the same coin. Lawfare would not exist without this. Dog Shirt TV sure as hell would not exist without this. But, and that's great for the 22 people who are watching this. Um, there's other collateral consequences. And so when we're talking about an information environment slash ecosystem, um, I do think Alicia's point that we should respect what we don't understand
Or
is a
ignore it.
really important one. Sorry?
Or ignore it. I have a little situation that I actually do have to get dressed and go somewhere. So I'm going to put one thing out and I will listen to the rerun to hear if you choose to address it or you can just go on to John. Maybe, I mean, I want to read Alicia's book, but maybe the best thing is to leave the disinformation alone. I have long suspected you can't actually fight it with regulation, with fact checking, with civic education, or any of the other solutions that Lisa talked about when she wasn't talking about helping individuals to fight campaigns specifically directed to them. But rather to be more creative about alternative channels for putting truthful information out using the same or similar technology, but just to make it an appealing competitive offering. And you won't reach the people who are already in the cult. But if you can find hooks that may be something else that's interesting or useful or attractive to information consumers, you do that. Like I was involved with campaigns to get messaging out to various demographic cohorts using TikTok, using Instagram, and so on before the election. And this stuff was studied using randomized controls and everything else to see that votes were being moved because you were feeding people content that would shift their attitudes and then swoop in at the end and tell them,
Right.
yeah, okay. So it's more the positive side of it that seems with the area of opportunity. And I have to go, but I will listen.
All right. So that is actually my instinct about what the right answer here, or what a right answer here. I'm not sure. I don't think there's the right answer, but I don't. You'll notice that I don't spend a lot of time on this show, you know, having Pinocchios, right? Or responding to disinformation or correcting people. And it's not that I don't believe that stuff has a place in the world, but I don't do it. The reason is that I don't want to let other people set the agenda. I also don't believe in exponential growth. Um, I don't want to be, sparring with Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk. And I want to grow slowly and steadily an audience that wants serious conversation over time. And, right now there are 23 of you, and maybe there'll be 500 who watch it on YouTube. And maybe next year at this time, there will be double that. That's my rough sense of how it should go. And I'm not going to spend time here arguing with flat earthers because that's a bad use of my time. Because I would rather talk to people who know something about the relationship between the Earth's orbit and ice ages about real information. And yeah, there are going to be fewer people who are going to want that, but I'm okay with that because I don't want to spend my time arguing with dilettantes. That's just not how I want to spend my time. And so my instinct is that building cultures of good information, of good, is much more important than correcting cultures of bad information. Am I right about that? I don't freaking know. Are we going to find out? Probably not. Um, but I do think part of the creation of good information ecosystems is the experimentation with different approaches and the good side of the old fuck around and find out kind of thing. So, welcome to the fuck around. John Hawkinson, not wearing a dog shirt, which I am not either, though it is Dog Shirt TV. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, good morning, Ben. I think first I want to say Happy Pi Day. And, for it's a good
Ooh,
time
you're
for all
right.
of us to think about the relationship, the ratio between diameters and circumferences and all that implies.
And also, speaking of disinformation, the famous, I believe, Indiana Pi law that
Let us
once
not
tr
speak of that on this glorious day.
that once tried to define, almost as a collateral matter, pi as equal to 3, which of course has to this day screwed up all circles in the state of Indiana and is not a recent or internet driven uh, um, bit of misinformation.
A law that will live in infamy. But again, let us not sully this great day with that. I also thought I should show up with what I wore yesterday, just to
And
acknowledge.
John, to his credit, showed up at yesterday's event in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that was it was lovely to see you.
Good to see you. On the merits, which I guess mean uh, Joel's question about Schumer, I thought it was worth noting first. Schumer had a column in today's Times where he explained himself, and you can, you know, make what you will of his explanation. I think it was mostly your third fear of, what Doge might do if they truly were allowed to shut down these departments. But it seems to me that much of this is about execution. Uh, that is, you can. It could well be that this was the end result, and maybe that everyone knew it. But to declare it in advance in the way that was done seems like it gives away your cards. Not to use that metaphor that was recently used in a different way, uh, in a way that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I don't want to quite say it's giving up leverage, but it kind of is. But we know that Schumer knows all that, and so it to me the question is, given that he knows that, why would he behave in the way he did?
Yeah, so I find it bewildering, honestly, and I have spent all of 12 hours kind of wondering about it, most of which I was asleep for. But it strikes me as the worst kind of negotiating that there is, right? Which is preemptively laying your cards down and saying, "I got nothing, so walk all over me, please." And you know, at a minimum, I don't understand why he didn't walk in with demands and maybe then fold if he was gonna fold. But I don't, and he seems to have surprised his caucus with this, which I'm also bewildered by why he doesn't feel some obligation to represent the center of gravity of his caucus. Um, I honestly don't know, and I think one possibility is that he's doing this because the caucus secretly needs it done. And so he's giving people cover. I don't think that's what's going on, honestly. And you'll see that if there's, you know, if people grumble and then do nothing. My impression is that people are really mad at him about it, and so I don't understand it. I don't think it makes. I think the reason I don't understand it is not that I'm unsophisticated, but that it's genuinely stupid. And I think if I'm right, you will see a movement over the next week or so to dump him in favor of somebody who's a more aggressively confrontational.
So, aside from the final point, I think all of that is true and fair, but also to note that people seem to be really upset about it is something that happened after the decision, necessarily so. And I think it could well be that Schumer did not anticipate the depth of the backlash that this would create. Uh,
Oh, I think that's almost certainly right. And I'm, uh, but that is bewildering for somebody of his political sophistication. This was clearly a moment in which people want somebody to confront the administration. They want somebody to confront, to stand for the idea that Congress is a coordinate branch of government that has the power of the purse and that gets to have a say in how the US government is structured, right? That there's no why should somebody of Chuck Schumer's sophistication, he's been around the block a lot of times, not understand that. And so I don't doubt that you may be right about that, but that only, presents the question that I, I don't know.
that's entirely fair. Turning to a completely different topic, our First Amendment item from earlier in the week at Mahmoud Khalil, I just
Yes.
want to note the importance of time zones, which seem to bewilder people. Uh, not just, by the way, our poor Arizona listeners, some of whom apparently have been missing out because they missed the fact that we changed time zones and they did not. But in the story of Mahmoud Khalil, who you all may recall was a Columbia University student who was arrested by ICE, uh, and he was moved to New Jersey and back to New York and then to Louisiana, and the exact times of when he was, where he was, make a lot of difference in the legal system with respect to where there is jurisdiction of courts to question his arrest. But ICE filed a declaration yesterday, or perhaps it was Wednesday, saying that he was moved to New Jersey at 2:20 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. And I just think
Which
it's
of course
important
is
that
a
everyone
time that did
understand that
not
that
ever
time
take place.
does not exist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
In
little bit.
fairness,
No, no, go ahead.
in a parenthesis, they also said 3:20 Eastern Daylight Time, but outside the parenthesis, the words that matter, they said 2:20 Eastern Standard Time. So I just feel like the need to highlight time zone literacy, especially on Pi Day.
Well, so I would like to say it is for those who remember the predecessor show to Dogshirt TV in lieu of fun, it is my long standing position that we should abolish time zones. And this would be a good example of that. All of this confusion would go away if we abolished time changes and time zones and we simply used Greenwich Mean Time. Now, for those who are going to say that's really Eurocentric of you, Wittes, I don't care if Greenwich Mean Time, if we use that, or Tokyo Standard Time, or, you know, uh,
This is just an
um,
acknowledgement of the fall of America
Johannesburg
and
time.
global hegemony.
Yeah, I'm just when I say Greenwich Mean Time, I mean some standard time, and I don't care. I know people get upset about this. I don't care if 7 in the morning in DC is called 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. I don't care. Um, I'm okay with however you want to, whatever you want to organize the the um, the standardization. I'm fine. The point is, it should be the same time because it is actually the same time in Washington, D.C. or New York, where he was removed from, as in Louisiana, as in Arizona, where the time, in fact, doesn't change. All of this can be, we could get rid of all of these problems if we just had standard time. And think about it, you get on a plane in one time zone and you get off in another time zone, and your ticket says the arrival time, and there's no difference between the arrival time and the departure time. In there's You don't have to adjust for the time difference because there's no time difference. International dateline gone. So I'm just saying you can correct all these problems. You could fly to Seoul, South Korea, and not have to change your clocks. And you could take a habeas petitioner out of New York and move him to Louisiana, and it would not create, you would not have problems in your ICE declaration. So, just saying, all roads lead to standard time, which was not where John thought this conversation was going.
I had forgotten your position on this, and I had especially forgotten that you not only did you want to standardize time across the globe, but you also wanted to remove seasonal time changes. Uh, I don't I don't know exactly how I feel about this.
They're dumb. It's arbitrary. You want to get up an hour earlier and go to sleep an hour earlier? Fine, do it. You don't need me you don't need the clock to
I mean,
reflect that.
personally, I use multiple time zones, so I feel I have the best and worst of both worlds. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't note that our Arizona listeners have some claim to righteousness here, for never shifting their time. And
Yeah,
so they could make an argument that if there were to be a standard time for the United States, use theirs. They were there first.
fine.
They stuck their flag down. So maybe if we wanted some kind of America, North United States of America centric time, and I don't know why we would. I think we should indeed acknowledge our lower place in the global hegemony now, and choose something in Europe. But nonetheless, if we were to choose our own, uh, Arizona would not be a bad place to start.
So I'm fine with that. I'm really totally agnostic about
Just wait
um
for the time zone wars.
look, I mean,
Local infantry
I
from
think
every state battling to make theirs the time of record.
yeah, I don't think look, I'm happy for it to be, Kiribati. I don't the like it doesn't matter. Whatever people think is, the time the sun comes up in their local jurisdiction will come to mean in their heads what 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. now means. Um, and, you know, there's just, it's as obvious that this is right as it is that the metric system makes sense. It's just that, well, we still haven't accepted that as Americans. But uh, people get locked into their ways of measuring things. And, I'm here to tell you that this problem, and admittedly, it's low down on the list and the problems in this particular litigation. And I wouldn't say it ranks higher than, say, the question of whether you can deport somebody for his First Amendment protected activities. But lurking behind it is the fact that ICE doesn't even know what time it is. And one could respond to that by saying, does anybody ever really know what time it is? And the answer is No, because it's different times in different places. And that is a problem we can correct. And with that, we are done for the day. We are done denouncing Lisa Kaplan and
Did you
all her
make your
work.
flight on time? How early were you?
My flight was right about just on time in both directions, and one of them I slept for.
No, no. The
And there was
question was
no,
your arrival at the flight.
oh, I was like an hour and a half early on
Ah,
the way there because I had to do the
of course.
show. Um, but on the way back, I was like 15 minutes early.
There we go.
So, you know, yeah, when I don't have to do a live stream, I don't spend time in airports. Folks, we're going to be back on Monday. Um, and, you know, see you then.